Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Mastering Dungeons. I'm Shawn Merwin here with Duke alum Teos Abadia. Hey
Let's go,
Teos, how's it
Duke.
going?
Let's go, Duke. I had the best time. Our basketball team has won 6 games in a row after a very kind of up and down season, beating Carolina. This is all dedicated to Mike Shea. And so,
Mhm.
yes, it is all things that are bad in life feel like they're not that bad because you have beaten your rival in college sports. It is like
Mhm.
defeating the big boss in an encounter. And so it just feels like I played like the greatest TTRPG game, even though I was watching other people hustle and I was enjoying a beverage on my sofa.
Hey, whatever gets you through your week, your weekend, you have to take these victories.
Yeah.
And what's
Yeah.
going to get me through my week is being able to record a podcast with you.
Same
So
here.
let's
Do this.
let's get this going. So we have a listener corner question. This is from Chappy Thoughts on Mastodon. And Chappy Thoughts says, this might be wild, but would it be better for game balance if all base classes were half casters and all full casters and full marshals broken up into features? And we're sort of trying to parse what this question means, but two things I there was a big thread on game balance started by Dennis Detweiler, I think, on Twitter.
Yeah.
And so that caught my eye. Plus this question talking about game balance and maybe play testing differently. So I wanted to talk about this anyway.
Cool.
So I at this point, I have to acknowledge my own bias. And when I see the word wild, that's what I want in playtesting right now. I want a major change, not because I think 5e is bad or 5e is broken or 5e is wrong. I just want to see something different. I want to see D&D grow and expand and change and morph. And I want Wizards of the Coast to be at the forefront of that. And I understand that they might not want to change the game too much, but at least during the playtesting, I want to see some attempts at that to show me something different. And I would love to see this tried. All base classes be half casters, even rogues.
Mm-hmm.
We have a subclass of rogue that is a half caster. Fighter, we have a subclass or more that
Yeah.
is a caster. So I would love to see that and see what you can do with that concept, and then push toward less reliance on spells or more reliance on spells within the subclasses of those classes.
Yeah, it's fascinating also as we look at these other RPGs, right? When I look at Shadow the Demon Lord, and today we're going to talk about Fate, like how different some games are at treating things that make the constructs of D&D look so heavy. Like spells can just seem so heavy through the context of some games, or they can seem super
Mhm.
light through the context of a few others. And you can see the wild attempts that D&D has done in the past, right, with 4E and how that went,
Mhm.
where you could argue that it all felt very spell-like, right, or things were. And I had a great discussion on Twitter with Rob Donahue about, what is it about 4E that would cause people to treat it very mechanically? But if you look at the actual powers of 4E, they're super descriptive. They have a really cool, neat
Mhm.
text. I mean, I know it is a little bit like a Magic the
Mhm.
Gathering description, but it, like the card text,
Mhm.
but it is cool flavor text. It really gives you an inspiring concept of what you're doing with your power, and that's true of whether it's shooting lightning out of your fingers or whether you're pushing someone with your shield and then moving into the opening you created. It's very evocative, and so it can be, and your powers are doing things like shoving your enemy or hitting them to the ground or whatever. And if you look at like older editions, like all we did was just cast like 2 spells and then we were out, and then everybody else is just doing the exact same thing over and
Mhm.
over again with their martial side. So it's wildly creative, but yet didn't feel that way. And so there's so much that is
Right.
the feel of the game, the balance of the game,
Mhm.
and yeah, I mean, that's the thing that I think makes me it makes my soul hurt a bit if I'm really honest. Like, I'm not being dramatic. It makes a bit hurt when I think of D&D
Right.
being the same for end of time, right? When they say like one D&D forever, it's like not only does it invoke Lord of the Rings, but it feels like it's just like Like I want innovation. I want periodic upheaval of the apple cart.
Yeah, I'm in the same position right now. And I think it would be interesting for the creators of the game to tell us what they think about balance,
Mm.
in the sense of, do they want all classes to sort of be similar, or do they not care? And that's a perfectly fine answer too, to not care about game balance, because the game plays well enough that you don't need balance in every area, as long as the overall game balances the player's fun and expression of their
Yeah.
wishes at the table.
And that's a big thing, is that balance can mean a lot of things, right? So things can be balanced and they can still be swingy. So we know that the
Mhm,
parameters are between these two posts, and that is balance because we know we're going to operate within that level, right? But other kinds of
mhm,
balance are really problematic. So like encounter balance, which seemed like a lot of what Dennis was talking about in that thread, you know, we want to have unpredictable results so that there is play in it, so that players can do wild, neat things with their characters, and then that can translate to victory or failure and tell great stories. But also, we want the DM to know, I'm going to create this really tough challenge, and that most cases you would run it, it would be a tough challenge. If you
mhm,
go to do that and you have no idea, as many 5e DMs feel, whether it's going to challenge their party or not, then that is a sense of balance that's not there, right? And
mhm,
similarly, if every multi-class build involves taking a level of, sorcerer, or it's, it has the word paladin in it somewhere, like then we go, I think we are off a bit, right? Or if people
right,
just won't play a certain build of a class, right? Because that's just
mhm,
seen as being disappointing and not measuring up. Well, that is a problem because we're not within those parameters, right? Like classes can be good at
right,
different things, but if they're not, if you're just, that's, we've failed
yeah,
there, right?
right. I mean, a lot of people, a lot of players, a lot of game masters, I think, see balance, and they're like, well, as long as the group that I'm playing with is cool with what's going on, yeah, we have the super optimized character, but that's fine, because the other players understand that and they work around that. But maybe somebody who is a game designer who goes to conventions and runs games for 50 different players over the weekend who bring their characters, and at every table you have the same builds going
Yeah.
on and on and on. That's where you can see that you might be able to fix something at your own individual table, or deal with it at your own individual table, while the game itself is not dealing with it in the same way or dealing with it properly.
Yeah, and so, going back to that original question, I think that you can do things where you say like, well, all classes are built a particular way, but you do that at a cost, right? You
Mhm,
pay that off by also giving up on some of what makes wild class design fun. And
mhm,
so, and if we take that to like the concept of the druid, right? One of the difficulties of the druid is we want it to be a full caster and to shape change. And as soon as we say,
mhm,
well, what if we don't? Then you end up with such a pigeonholed class that it now becomes something different. Right now, it's like this beast transforming thing that's all it does, and it loses all the spell utility and the curing and the what.
mhm,
And do we really want that, right? And now are we just describing like a type of barbarian, right? Or so
mhm.
those are hard questions, and there aren't necessarily perfect
Yeah,
answers to them, but that's what you end up with when you
right.
when you play with that.
And what Chappy Thoughts might be saying too is, you can have the druid be a half caster, and in one subclass of it, those half casting slots
Mm,
are wild shapes. In another subclass, those half casting slots are spells. For the
mm,
fighter, those half caster slots are your special maneuvers that you can do, and or you can build different things. So that might be what features are, and then you can substitute things in and out for them. And I think that would be a cool design
mhm.
to look at.
Yeah, yeah, certainly could work, and that's the kind of thing that I do. Like, it's funny seeing the super negative reaction overall against the druid, because I'm actually
Mhm,
really happy that Wizards has gone from the normal design and tried something out. And I hope they try
mhm,
a version, beyond this, that kind of adjusts it a bit to see whether there's something in there that could really work. Because I like that concept, as we
mhm.
said, but we'll see.
Yep. Awesome. So thank you, Chappy Thoughts. and you can all hit us with questions or comments on Twitter, Mastodon, our YouTube channel, directly emailing us at mastering D&D at gmail.com, and any other ways that you can reach out to Teos, myself, or the show. Let's get right now to our news and commentary section, where we get more information on the D&D movie that is about 3.5 weeks away. So I'm starting to get a little excited. Today, I did something that I don't ever remember doing, and that is, what am I going to wear to the D&D movie? I rarely think about what I'm going to wear as I'm putting on what I'm going to wear. And I was like thinking, oh, should I wear a D&D shirt? Yeah, that's how excited I am about this
Wow.
movie coming out.
Peak
Yeah.
levels of
Yeah.
yeah. All right, I like that.
Speaking of wardrobe.
I
So,
I found myself seeing whether I could buy advanced tickets yet. The answer was no, at least in
mhm,
my area. And I'm like, oh, like I just like I'm ready to, like I want to know where I'm
yep.
sitting. And I haven't been to a movie since pre-pandemic, so this is a very big thing for me. But yeah, this article, there's an article in Variety, and I really enjoyed it. I highly recommend it as a read. It covers a variety of topics. It's nicely done. There's some really nice back and forth between Goldstein and Daly, the two directors and writers of the D&D movie, that shows, how they developed their friendship, what D&D has meant to them over time, how they view Hollywood male actor egos. And I had to laugh because I read this, and I shared with my wife kind of what they said about sort of how a lot of males, what they're really saying was, a lot of male actors, especially leads, that you say to them, hey, be vulnerable. And you'd think that as actors, they would be like, cool, that's a neat thing to do. The actors will say, I don't know how to do that, or I don't want to do that, because like their whole mentality is be strong, right? Like show off.
Mhm.
I can be an action hero, I can be a whatever. And so that a lot of actors, it's really hard to do that. And then the next day, I by mistake, opened some new tab in Microsoft Edge, and it fed me some headline of like, D&D movie crushes male egos or something like that. And I laughed so
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that was just one of the many things that they talked about. The interviewer was talking about if they would do more of the movies, and the Goldstein and Daly were like, well, I don't know. And the interviewer said, well, you have the word dragon eggs written up on that whiteboard. And Goldstein said, well, that could be anything. And Daly said, yeah, that's a $30 million comedy.
Oh,
And then they finally admitted, look, if we are fortunate enough to get a great turnout for this movie and it does well, obviously we're game for getting back into the D&D world. So um, that was pretty funny. But overall, it was a really interesting article because they do dig down into things we've been talking about since the first D&D movie came out,
mm,
which is how do you create a D&D movie that's going to be a success for everyone?
right.
And you can't in D&D rely on well-known characters like you can for comic books, because there aren't any in the wider world. So you have to make your own. But that opens up opportunities to do things that you might not be able to do if you are relying on James Bond or Iron Man or all of those things. And it was fascinating to see them sort of working through this process of figuring out how they were going to do those things.
Yeah, yeah, and it was something that they're well acquainted with, and they understand what they're trying to do. But yeah, it's super hard. I just watched a movie this weekend on Netflix that was clearly a hugely budgeted thing. It was like, I don't know, the School of Good and Evil or something, and I cannot recommend it. Boy, did they have a budget! Boy, did they have intentions! It did not play well for me. I hope other people
Yeah.
enjoy it. And all I could think of was, the D&D movie better be nothing like this.
Well, I think they've hit onto it, and they said it right in this article, which is, we're not going to make an epic fantasy drama.
Mhm.
Thank goodness, because that can be down the line. But we're not going to spoof it either.
Yeah.
Which thank goodness, right? They talked about Monty Python, being satire, but also being intelligent comedy, and not going for the easy laugh, but going for that deeper laugh. And the other thing that was really fascinating from that article was when they said that the characters in the movie sort of typify the different kinds of D&D players,
Mm,
right? So Chris Pine's character is sort of the one that plays for the joke,
yeah.
whereas the paladin is the super nerdy player who is very serious about the whole game, and they're not going to laugh, and they're not going to break that fourth wall, and
Right.
they're going to be all about the mission and their character and doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And I thought
Follow the
that's
rules. And
perfect.
yeah. Yeah. Let's
Right.
stay on
Yep.
plan, stay on mission. Yeah. Yeah. That is really smart. Oh man, I'm excited for this thing. Really am.
Yep. Yep. I'm trying to dampen my enthusiasm. I'm trying to keep it in perspective. It's going to be okay, Teos. It's going to be okay. Yep.
Yeah.
Go in with expectations where they should be.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of expectations, we now know that Acquisitions Incorporated are going to be kickstarting their upcoming series. And in fact, by the time this show drops, that Kickstarter may already be up and running. Jerry Holkins and Mike Krahulik of Penny Arcade, they're launching this Kickstarter on March 8th to fund the new Series 2 of Acquisitions Incorporated recorded series. Mike's going to come back as Jim Darkmagic. The story is going to be sort of a reboot with a fresh start for those existing characters. And the Kickstarter is probably going to include a book that Jerry is writing on the origins of Jim and Omen's friendship
Mm.
or partnership. I don't know if I can go as far as friendship.
Yeah. Friendship is a lot of things. That's
Yeah.
interesting. I'm so excited. There's a nice article that we link to in the notes, and then we also link to the Kickstarter, so you can go there and check it out. But yeah, I'm excited to see how this goes. I enjoyed it. They did a sort of series like this which was all about going into a dwarven enclave, which we ended up using part of that dwarven enclave. We used it in our book, in the Acq Inc book. But
Mhm.
that whole series was really kind of neat because it was sort of an intimate way of when you're not live and you're playing like that. It's a nice environment, and it was interesting. The reporter in this interview at one point, something asks them about sort of how they approach the game, kind of comparing to other streams, and they're like, we're not trying to
Mhm.
make like a fancy stream. We just want to play with our friends and have that be the story, right? Of what it feels like to play with your friends. And I think Acq Inc has always managed to do that, right? To feel like
Mhm.
it's just what the game they
Yeah.
want to play. They're not doing it for an
Right.
audience, even if there is an audience there.
Right. Yeah. They're not dismissive of those other things. Those are fine forms of entertainment, but they say we just want to play and record it and sort of have the almost the players be the fun,
Yeah.
uh, or as much of the fun as any other part of the game. Yep. The first RPG created by the National Research Institute is now available. Tell me about this, Teos.
Yeah, so it's really hard from the webpage to exactly put all the data points together, but in Japan, the National Astronomical Observatory of Japan has created what must be the first time that any national research institute has created an RPG, and it is called Sandcastle. And the Sandcastle RPG, there's a webpage there. You can download all the rules for free. And the game has nothing to do with astronomy, but the hope is that you playing this game will cause you to think about what this National Research Institute is doing and sort of further its ways. And they sort of share it in a hope that other national research institutes will take this RPG and use it as well. I thought it was all very fascinating, but hey, cool, you got a free RPG and you can think about astronomy. I thought it was super
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, that is odd, but hey, good for them for recognizing role playing games
Yeah,
place in society now.
yeah,
So, speaking of role playing games, if you are going to play a very specific class in D&D, we now have a list of books that you should read to get you into the frame of mind to play that class to its fullest. So, this bookriot.com article recommends 2 books for every D&D class, including Matt Mercer's Blood Hunter. The article talks about why the book is helpful in fleshing out your type of character and serves as a way to pick up interesting novels that you may have missed in your reading life. I haven't read many of the books or any of the books. Well, I shouldn't say none, but very few of those
yeah.
books have I read. But Yeah, it looked like an interesting way to come at D&D from either direction. Either, oh, I
Yeah.
just read this book and now I want to play a character like that, or I'm always playing rogue, so let me read about a
Yeah.
rogue in this fantasy setting.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty neat. I had not read a lot of these books either, though I know other people were talking about the article had. But I do like when I read a novel and I can go, oh yeah, this character is this class, right? This
Mhm.
protagonist is from this class, and that can inspire my play as in future things. So I thought it was a very neat idea for an article.
And Kobold Press is doing a bunch of things, starting with Dungeon 23. They've been blogging. A dungeon is part of the Dungeon 23 concept, where you design a dungeon room each and every day of the year. This blog includes design tips, making it interesting for designers looking for a few lessons in dungeon design. And at the end, you will get your very own 5e dungeon.
It's a clever take on it, right? Like, let's not just do Dungeon 23, but let's tell you how we do Dungeon 23 and why we do that. And so you can pick up some lessons. I thought that was very smart of them to do it that way.
Speaking of Kobold Press, I got an email as an original backer of the Tome of Beasts on Kickstarter, and it told me that after 8 years, it was high time for Kobold Press to update the original Tome of Beasts. So that's what they're doing. They offered backers of that original Tome of Beasts a discount, but on their website, they have a page up now where you can pre-order or get more information on this updated Tome of Beasts, which will include errata, streamlined mechanics, 11 new creatures like the Ashwalker, the Plane Watcher, and the Ancient Cave Dragon, new tables for creature type and terrain, and new monster art and more. And I thought this is really interesting because honestly, when Kobold Press started their Black Flag initiative, I thought, okay, so here's what they're going to do. They're going to put out Black Flag, and then they're going to say, and here are all these Tome of Beasts and creature codexes we've done, and now we're going to update them to Black Flag stats. And I was like, okay, yeah, that would be smart. They're pulling this string early here before Black Flag is ready, and I'm wondering if that's to get money to actually make Black Flag,
Oh,
or if it's that's what they're doing, is they're updating it for Black Flag, but they're just not saying it. I would say it if that's what they were doing, because that would bring more interest. But
yeah.
it was an interesting concept for me.
It's very fascinating. One of the things that I'm really curious about, especially with Kyle Brink saying on all the interviews, this is 5.5, not 6E, is that 3.5 caused massive upheaval in how people sold things. And I've seen there have been a number of sort of roving discounts on D&D products, including, I mean, absurdly low Amazon prices on things like Van Richten's, right? It was such a
Mhm.
fantastic book. We reviewed it on our show. But then, now you see, well, what exactly is Kobold Press doing as a result of sort of their efforts to do a new thing, and perhaps looking at how 6E, 5.5, whatever we want to call it, will shape. So it'll be interesting to see what various companies do, whether they try to sort of update, move, streamline. But this is really surprising. I would have thought they would have done this, after the one D&D version came out, or after
Mhm.
Black Flag did, right? So you could have done both things. And this is a high price point for this particular item. Like, this is an $80 book for this
Yeah.
limited edition that they're calling it. So it's kind of surprising that they are doing this, but and it has a different cover and everything. But wow, yeah.
Yeah. And speaking of Black Flag, soon we should be seeing the second playtest packet. They haven't released the packet yet, at least as of this point, but they talk about different magic circles. They're going to have the first 8 levels of the wizard and the fighter, and they're going to have a new fail forward luck mechanic that is going to replace inspiration.
Mm.
So we'll have some interesting things to read over there when it comes out.
Yeah, and that's an interesting strategy because I think they are managing to be the sort of loudest group out there, sort of making a new, you know, a new D&D like game, right? That's
Mhm.
clearly, obviously, sort of we're remaking D&D, and they're grabbing maybe the most headlines. out of the various efforts, and so it'll be really interesting to see how this does, how it succeeds or fails, in terms of
Mhm.
that approach. Fascinated by it.
Yep. Yeah. And staying in the realm of Kickstarter, we have two Kickstarters in progress, one that Teos worked on and one that I worked on. Teos, you want to take us through Forge of Foes one time real quick here?
Yeah, absolutely. We are super, super happy for everybody who's backed Forge of Foes, who listens to the show. Thank you. Really hugely appreciate it. If you haven't checked it out, please take a look. Forge of Foes, the Lazy DM's Forge of Foes for 5e. And I recently posted a video, and I did one the week before, but a video walking through how you take monster powers, which is an aspect of this book, and I took various monsters, like I took an ogre, a fire giant, a wraith, a skeleton, and I even took fate monsters, a shadow dark monster, and talked about Night's Black Agents as examples of how you can take monster powers and modify these monsters to make them really cool in your game. So you can check out that video and see how I did that. The book overall, it has a bunch of these monster powers. It also has all kinds of advice on everything from modifying monsters, making the most of the monsters you have, encounter design, terrain, you name it, a lot, everything that has to do with kind of how monsters would show up in your game.
And on my side, there's about when this show drops, there will be about a week left in the Grim Hollow Valakin Clans Kickstarter, where we take a deep look at the Valaka region of Grim Hollow of the world of Etheris. Inside is a gazetteer of that area, new raiding mechanics that are sort of a mini war game that you can play based on the idea of raiding. We have 12 new martial maneuver subclasses. So one for each of the main 5e classes. We have new transformations. If you're familiar with Grim Hollow, you'll know what that means. New threats, new monsters. And then there's a full campaign also attached to the Kickstarter. So you can check that out. There's a link in the show notes as well. So thank you for your support so far, and we'll see you in the funny papers, as they say.